Hello, my name is Shelley Phipps. I'm a member of the Department of Economics at Dalhousie University, and I'm very happy to have been invited to talk about policies to improve the lives of Canadian children. I'm sure everybody will agree with me when I say that I think that thinking about policies that can improve the well-being of children today is a really important policy goal in and of itself. I'm an economist, and a lot of economists who study children tend to emphasize the longer term outcomes for children. So they would be interested, for example, in studying child development, how it affects eventual educational attainment, which affects earnings, which affects taxes that people will pay, for example. And even if that's the focus, even if the focus is on that long term will make a taxpayer who pays more, still, I'm going to argue that child happiness today is important for those long term outcomes. So even if you're worried about whether the child succeeds in attaining a university education and a good job, if they're not happy today, it's really hard to pay attention in school. And we have all kinds of research evidence that a child who's anxious, who's fidgety, they won't do as well when they're little, and that will snowball into eventual later outcomes. It's also really important to think about child well-being in the context of the families with which they live. In fact, it's hard to think about child well-being without thinking about that. Parents provide resources. We economists always talk about resources of money and time, and they make decisions about how to allocate these resources. But what I really want to stress today is that it's not just having money and having time, but the whole climate of the family that's really important for child well-being. If parents are stressed out, that's bad for the happiness of their children. So it can be that parental stress is due to worries about current actual shortages of money or of time, or what increasingly with heavy involvement in the labor force of mothers with young children, shortages of both time and money. So just imagine you have a full-time paid job and you have a really long commute and you just wish, oh, if only I could move closer to the office, I wouldn't have to spend so much time on this, but I can't afford it. And I have to get to the parent-teacher interview, and the teacher is going to tell me that I'm not spending enough time doing the homework with the kids, and to get to the doctor's appointment, and I'm going to get told I have to exercise more, and I have to spend more time making healthy meals, and then there's physio, and I know I'm not doing the exercises, and I'm not sure if I can afford the physio, and grandma's just home from the hospital, I haven't gone there, and then there's the laundry, and then there's the grocery, and then I have to do the homework. So there's a lot of stress that can be coming from not having enough money, not having enough time, and that combination of the two of them is really bad. It's also the case that parents can stress about the possibility, realistic possibility, for example, of losing a job or having a health outcome of one's own or someone else in the family worsen. That might restrict the ability to do paid work, for example, or mean that you need more money to pay for therapy, perhaps to pay for drugs that are not covered by your extended health plan. And if you don't have a great job, you probably don't have a great extended health plan. And if you lose your job, you're going to lose that. And if there's extra caregiving, you're going to need extra time for the caregiving on top of everything else. So, not surprisingly, very large numbers of Canadian parents report themselves to be stressed. In 2016, in the General Social Survey, 3/4 of married mothers and 2/3 of married fathers who had a preschool child in the house reported that they found their days stressful. For mothers, the main source of stress was having not enough time, followed by family, followed by finances. For the dads, it was work and finances kind of equal and not enough time. In recent research that I've been doing with co-authors Nancy Kong and Barry Watson, we have looked at the link between parental stress and the well-being of preschool children. So we find, for example, that preschool children are less happy, more anxious, more hyperactive, less attentive when their parents say they're worried about having enough money to support the family. And we also find that if the parents become more worried about money, the children become less happy or more inattentive. And for little girls, it's mostly the anxious and happy. For little boys, it's more the fidget and be hyper. And the important pathway that we find, the link between the parents being worried about money and the child's happiness, is the parent's parenting behavior as reported by the parent. So there are a whole lot of questions about this. And in every case, we find that the more worried the child is or the parent is about money, the worse their reported parenting behavior is. So they do things like yell at the child, they're inconsistent, they're more critical, their punishment depends more on their current mood, and so forth. So that's the link between the parent's stress and the well-being of their children. People who study child happiness very much like to have the children reporting for themselves in their own words how happy they feel. And this, of course, is not possible for the really little ones, but children by the age of 12 to 15 in several Canadian surveys are now asked to assess their own happiness. And in one case, they were asked to assess how well they felt that their parents got along. Presumably an outcome that is stress-related for the family. And we find very strong associations between the child's self-assessed happiness and the degree to which they feel their parents get along. And this is in comparison, for example, to the much smaller associations we find for family income, for the time that the young teen gets to spend with friends, and so forth. So let's talk about policies. That's what we're all about here. I'm going to just zip over. I could not contain myself to just not say what I always talk about, which is how would we reduce income shortages? How would we reduce child poverty? So, for example, we have had enhancements to the Canada Child Benefit, which is associated with reductions in child poverty. We're talking all the time about reducing childcare costs. We have discussions. COVID has just enhanced all of our discussions of these kinds of programs like paid sick leave, pharmacare. These kinds of enhancements to our social safety net would reduce the extent to which parents are worried about realistic possibilities of extra financial concerns. The thing I thought I would focus on that I don't normally focus on, and I don't think we talk about as much as policy analysts talking about child happiness, and that is how to alleviate parental time stress. So one possibility is to potentially reduce the homework time that little children are required to do, so that parents, instead of having to sit down and work on math or work on the spelling list and do that project, could just play or read stories during that time, which would be less stressful for the parents and less stressful for the children as well. COVID has revealed to us important differences also in the ability of different parents to help with schoolwork. So if you have two professors as your parents, as my poor children did have, then they're used to teaching. I'm not sure that this is actually better for your children, but nonetheless, you do understand and can help with the math if you have two economists as your parents, whereas some other families might have a harder time with that. Particularly important suggestion that I have would be to allow part of the EI parental leave to be saved for later use. Until, as is the case, this exists in Scandinavia. In Denmark, you're allowed to save some of your parental leave until your child is 9, or in Sweden until your child is 8. There, therefore, is no additional expenditure. We're simply delaying expenditure we might already have made. There might be advantages from both the worker's point of view and the employer's point of view to having the employee come back at least part-time earlier. There would be flexibility then offered to parents to be able to deal with occasional childhood illnesses or appointments, possibly having to have a surgery to go on a school outing or just to take some time off together as a family that I really think would alleviate time stress for the family. Note that this is only going to be helpful, though, for families in cases where the parents are eligible for EI parental benefits, and that's not always the case. And finally, I would say then for other families and for families with older children, doing something like just increasing paid vacation time and even statutory holidays, but increasing the legal requirement in a province to offer parents paid vacation time, that they have some flexibility again in taking it when they need it, I think would also benefit families, reduce parental time stress, and enhance the happiness of the children living in that family. And we currently rank very low. We're second only to the US. Many parents in Canada have only 10 paid vacation days in addition to the statutory holidays. But this having a little more time that you could take off with pay, so it doesn't increase financial worries, but it could alleviate some time stress, I would argue is a low cost and high potential benefit way to reduce stress for parents and enhance the well-being of their employees. Thanks so much for listening to my ideas.